G'day, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm your host, Sammy Gordon, and I'm joined by the all-around good bloke and legend, not a bad-looking fella as well, big Jimmy Ibrahim, mate. Welcome back to the show. How are you?
G'day, Sammy boy, and hello to all of our listeners. I'm good, mate. I'm good. How are you? Gee, I got to say, because we're recording this over Zoom for people or
Yes.
Teams or whatever we call it. But, mate, your tan is on point. Sammy boy, he's looking fresh, folks. He's looking bronzed. He's looking tanned. The Bullshark has had a bit of a swim. He's looking good. You're looking good.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, buddy. I had a week off, mate. I went to New Caledonia, have a bit of a chill for a week with Morgs, and yeah, man, it was good. This is a week old, mate. So she's deteriorated a little bit, but man, mate, I'm actually happy. It's a bit of commitment, you and I today. It's a public holiday morning for me on the Monday, the whatever it is, Monday the 1st of May. I think it's a Labor Day in Queensland. And, mate, you're bloody in Barcelona at about 10 o'clock at night or something.
Mate,
yeah, good.
You know what? There's not very often that the Scouting Australia podcast and you are not too far away from my brain and my mind, Sammy boy. You're just running through.
Oh, mate, that's creepy and comforting at the same time.
It is a little bit, but for our listeners out there, we are committed to the cause, right? And of course, we need to keep the show moving, and we need to keep content going out there for our listeners. But it also, further to your point, Sammy, what it shows is if you're committed to doing something and you've promised to deliver on something, whether it's your property, whether it's your savings, whether it's your finance, whatever it is, you just got to get it done. Right,
mate. Commitment is key. The people expect it from us, especially the Q&A once a month, mate. Everyone's been asking for it, so it's a quality thing to, I think, be putting out, mate. Thank you for jumping on after your paella in the day watching Barcelona.
I've drank more sangria in the last 3 days than I have in my whole life. So
you're looking a bit red. I was going to say you look a bit like a tomato, but probably a bit more like a sangria.
A pasty tomato. That's what I'm looking like.
Get off the red today. Get off the red.
Yeah.
Blood on the streets in Barcelona.
Mate, you know how much I love the Q&As, and I know how much you love them too, because it's feedback directly from our listeners. And our listeners, they want their words. They want to say their opinions on our show, and we love people writing in, right?
We do, mate. We do. We want them to keep sending it in, mate. We're always stacked. We're always backlogged with a nice, healthy chunk of questions. Hence why we're jumping on and doing this as a monthly occurrence now. So yeah, man, it's beautiful. I'm looking forward to it. Let's bang out another one of the old Q&A, monthly Q&A, mate. Let's go.
Let's get straight into it. So I've got a whole bunch of questions here for you. Now, if everyone who's listened to our other Q&As, you know how much I love stumping the Bullshark. So the Stumping Sammy segment, I'm wondering if today, I've had a quick look through some of the questions.
You look a bit stumpy, mate. Look at you. That's all of you.
Mate, I'm not very, 6'3".
6 inches.
Well, anyway, that's another story. But let's get into the questions. Man. We're hitting it off with Anonymous Smith. Anonymous Smith pops up very often.
Anon's back.
He pops up very often, Anonymous Smith. The question is,
go on.
I know. Yeah. Hi, Sammy and Jimmy. I'm wondering, how do you typically value a property? Realestate.com.au values seem to be much lower for my property than what I can see selling. Okay. But surely they are accurate as more closely linked to the market pricing. So do you use CoreLogic? Do you use realestate.com.au for the valuations? How do you do it? So that's a really good question.
Anonymous, he's coming with the goods.
It has.
So look,
Anon,
he's back. So look, very rarely do I take desktop valuations and whatnot into account, especially in a rising market. So desktop vals are something you've got to be very, wary of when it comes to like domain and realestate.com.au and all those sorts of things. You've got to be a little bit wary of them, purely because they're typically lag data. So, a sale comes through, and a lot of the time, if you have a look at them, even like your CoreLogic vals, which back in the day, in a flat market are reasonably accurate. But in a rising market, a lot of the time, your CoreLogic valuation data is kind of like, sometimes they can be like 3 to 6 months old. Sometimes I've seen them even like 12 months old that they're pulling comparables from. So it is not like an accurate methodology of assessing market value. They're just like a bit of a rough indication as to where something might be sitting. in my mind, like with currently. But what I would really be doing is looking at what those comparable sales are doing, and you're kind of looking at pocket by pocket typically. So a lot of the time, there's always cheap pockets and there's always expensive pockets in an area. And there's always the middle of the road as well. So it's always very good to understand where your property sits within those pockets and sits within that bracket of a suburb. And then, yeah, man, really utilizing that as comparable data. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they're actually going to buy, or even when they're trying to value their own property, is they'll go buy in the cheapest, shittest part of a suburb and go, oh, but those ones over there are selling, they buy for 300. Oh, they're selling for 350, 400. But it's a completely different pocket. You might be in the middle of Hauser or whatever. So it's something you've got to be really wary of. But yeah, I guess the easiest way to answer that question is know your pocket well enough and your surrounding area sort of pockets, and then draw direct comparables of what you're seeing sell from those areas. If things, one of the other things as well is, like, a lot of the time sales agents don't post sale prices. So they might say, contact agent or whatever. If you're in an area where a lot of that happens, just call the agents for a few surrounding sales around your property, and then you should know what things are selling for around that.
It's quite frustrating, that, isn't it? Do you find that that's annoying when you call
it can be, yeah, it can be quite annoying. We're normally like well ahead of it with what we do. Yeah. We know what things are selling for almost instantly, or before they've even settled. But yeah, for those who don't really know what's going on, or maybe not be as active in a market, yeah, it can definitely be frustrating.
All right, so for the listeners out there, and Anon, can we call him Anon? It's very important. I think you brought up a couple of good points there, but because a lot of people will look at the listings and look at what's listed in the prices, right?
Yes.
And they'll try and draw their valuation from that. Oh, but this place is listed for 480, or So what you're saying is, make sure it's based on the sales, like what is actually transacting. That is your most accurate valuation in that market, right? That's the first point, yeah?
Yeah, 100%.
And secondly, also being accurate or being realistic or being honest with what your listing is or what your property is. So if one is like 4-bedroom and you've got a 4-bedroom, but they've got a pool and they've got all these other things and all that, like, don't fudge your own numbers. Don't make it up with what your property is compared to the ones that are selling, right?
Yeah.
That's a really important point, right? Because that can be really misleading, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of people get that really wrong. It's a very common trait of a novice investor, just purely to make themselves feel better about what they've got, or make them think that they've kind of got more in it than what they do. And it's just like the way I always look at it is, don't cheat yourself with the numbers. Like, numbers don't lie, which is a very, very key point, I think. So yeah, man, just be really, I guess, accurate and honest with yourself around it, because the banks aren't going to valid at what something's selling for in a different pocket if it's highly desirable, or if, like you said, it's a much fully renovated home with a pool in a nice pocket, and yours is a 10-year-old rental that looks like crap with no pool and in the cheaper pocket. The valuation is going to come back to reflect that. So just be honest with yourself on it. And especially if you're about to buy something, that's what you have to be very honest with yourself about it, because that's a mistake a lot of people make early on.
Can I ask you just a quick extension of this question, just because it jumped into my mind? You're seeing all these properties sell for a certain price, right? So
yes,
they're all comparable. So you're like, okay, I'm confident with that. Then you get the bank val done you're going to refinance something, and the bank has just screwed you over and come up with a number that's way shorter than what the comparable sales are in that market. What would you do then?
So you can always challenge Vals. It does happen occasionally. I mean, it happens, right? It probably happens 50% of the time, especially like what we see is we'll get a lot of our clients to val up 90 days post-settlement, because that's typically the earliest you can get a decent val on something is normally 90 days post-settlement. And then, sometimes like 50% of the time they don't val up where they should, right? So then you have to wait another 90 days. Typically 6 months post-settlement, you're going to get pretty close to market value. One big, I guess, precursor on this or something caveat on this would be your lender or who you're with will also dictate a lot of the time the valuer that they put you with, and the lower tier banks will be more conservative with their valuations because they have a lower risk profile. They've got a higher serviceability risk profile than, say, the mainstream banks, but they've got a lower risk profile when it comes to assessing market value and giving cash outs and stuff like that. So it's just something to be a little wary of on that front. you normally, if you want to challenge your val, you've got to have like substantiated evidence in terms of like literally within 100, normally within a 500-meter radius. But the easiest way is if you've got like direct comps in like an immediate radius of it, you can sometimes challenge it with that. 90% of the time, your challenges don't go through. I've had a few that I've challenged that I've had a few that I've challenged and got another 100,000 as an equity uplift. But then I've had plenty of others that I've challenged and just flat out no as a response.
You know, it was funny, right? I was looking at a recent deal that I was trying to get refinanced, the one that I got in Asply. Yeah.
Yes.
And the rates came in, land value, the notice, it came in at 720, right? So
land
there's been a big up in the land value.
Yeah.
The bank's value that they came back at was 800 grand.
Yeah.
But the land value is 720. So what would you like in that situation? I'm like, dude.
But that's also rateable land value by the council, right? So like
that's right.
The difference is the council want to jack your land rates as quickly as possible, as soon as possible. And Queensland are fantastic at doing it. It's like, oh, we've had a boom. No worries. They're double now. We won't increase the rateable land tax threshold. We won't increase that, but your land rates have gone up. And so like that's what you'll see a lot of the time. I've seen it as well, man, where someone might have gone through the roof in cheaper, like lower price pointed areas, but it's just they're not worth in terms of a block. If you could sell it for that, I'd be mad to go and sell it for, but like you couldn't sell a block for that sort of money. Yeah, man. So like it's I don't put rateable land value made by the council in my assumptions at all.
Okay, great. Good point. All right, Anon. I think we nailed him. I think we got him. We did well.
Back to your investor level there for a second.
Well, I was just saying for people that are out there, they might be looking at that.
It's a good point.
At what, so
that's why
we're appealing to the people, Sammy. We're appealing to the people.
All right, mate. All right? You are one of the people.
So number two, geez.
Wow.
Can we say who this is from?
Bro, I don't even have the list in front of me.
Oh, okay. All right. JT. We'll just call him JT.
JT.
All right. This is texted to
JT.
How do you assess a deal to determine whether or not it is right for someone?
Okay.
So how do you assess it?
How do you assess if a deal is right for you?
Yeah, for someone, for a client.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take that more as a question of like, how do you assess if a deal is right for you? Okay. Because that's probably the best way to answer it. It always comes into the equation of what are you going to run out of next? And it always comes back to your strategy and what are you actually trying to build out? If you've got an issue with serviceability or you're getting very, very close to it, you have to look at what should we be doing with this deal next up and how do we structure this deal properly to get the best result? And if you're running out of serviceability, we need to target a high cash flow deal. If you're running out of capital or you know that capital is going to be an issue, but serviceability is good. Like most of our clients that come to us, first timers or a couple of deals in, normally like they can be quite low on capital. So they might be coming with, 50, 60, 80, $100,000, but their serviceability is good for the next 3 or 4 deals, but they've only got that amount of capital to work with. And it took them 4 years to save it. Capital is going to be their problem. So we need to make sure that we're making a discount on the way into a deal, that we're buying in the right area that's going to continue to grow, to continue to give us chunks to work with and to be able to pull out and keep building the portfolio. And so, in those two scenarios, if you're low on serviceability, you need a cash flow deal. If you're running out of capital or you're very low on capital, your serviceability is fine. You need a bread and butter and you need to keep building the foundations with assets and with deals like that. So it's normally a pretty straightforward scenario. The only caveat on it being straightforward is if you are at the limit of both. And that's when there's no easy way for me to answer that because that's where I would have to have a look at someone individually to make a decision on what would be the right property for that. I've got different strategies and workarounds for how you get around that if you're running into the wall, but obviously running into the wall of both, but obviously it really comes down to an individual and their situation as to which one you really chase on that in that regard. But in a nutshell, man, it's either or. You're running out of capital, you're running out of serviceability. That's what you need to target next up.
Okay, and that's really important to understand what you need, right? That's an awareness of where you are at in your portfolio.
Yes,
because you buy the wrong property in the wrong time, and that can really hurt you. It can put you back at least a few years, right? And we've seen that time and time again for people. I've
seen a lot of people that they don't get the idea and they don't get the concept around the fact that they need to keep building capital, and so they might have 100, 150 grand, which they think is that's a lot. I could go to a cash flow deal with it, and you could. And yes, you go generate, $15,000 per annum net passive after all costs from one deal. Great. but now you're stuck. So it's like that was a great, it was a great deal. And we did really well out of it. And yeah, you utilize your capital. But now you're out of capital. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're done. Like you have to wait for like significant market growth or something like that to be able to pull it back out. A lot of the time you can't just extract it. They're normally quite heavy, capital heavy deals. So really, you really got to assess that scenario in that situation to make the correct decision moving forward.
It's actually an interesting point you brought up, because if you gave people the choice as to which deal they would do, most people would initially be attracted to cash flow. You're like, 100%. Yeah, cash flow, done.
Yeah.
Right. But you should never be buying a cash flow deal if it's going to hurt your ability to continue to accumulate. Yes. Right. Yes. So for people that are out there listening to this, and of course, we always talk about high cash flow, and that's a really important part of your strategy. But the cash flow and what you're going to reap the benefits of your cash flow, you're not going to really realize that, apart from a serviceability perspective to allow you to continue to accumulate, you're not going to really reap the benefits of it until at the end when we're consolidating debt.
Yes.
Right. So I think for people to understand, when you add that in, that cash flow deal, don't get seduced in thinking, get it now. Yes, I've got this cash flow. I'm going to be going out for 10 grand a year, going on a holiday, going to Barcelona. You're not doing that.
You're doing it on a string of bunch of guys.
I'm at a backpackers.
The dog box is in. Is that a dog behind you?
Mate, I'm working. I'm working over here. So it's really important for people that are listening out there to understand, like, the capital growth properties are so important, Sammy, aren't they, for people to understand?
They are.
They need those.
The one thing I will throw in on that, though, again, throwing little caveats on everything you say, because most of what you say is shit. But but in all honesty, right, as you build the portfolio.
Oh, geez. Why did I tune into this call again? Tell me. I could be in Las Ramblas on the beach. I could see the water. I'm listening to your crap.
Mate, you need a monthly dose of me giving it to your heart stops, all right? Or your brain stops, one or the other.
Go on.
No, I forgot what I was going to say now. I'm joking. So, like, as you build the portfolio, right? So, like, a lot of people think as well, but if I build it like that, then I'm not going to see, with what you said there, like, I'm not going to see cash flow till the very end. It's not typically the way it works, because what you do, like, if you're building towards a portfolio of 100 to 150K, as you build in cash flow deals over the life of the portfolio, it's not like you don't actually see the benefits or reap the rewards until the back end. They're still going to be positive, even at an 80 or a 90% LVR. They're still going to have positive cash flow. And that's going to be awesome. It just won't be at the same level, right? So that debt consolidation can turn a deal around that might be, let's say that deal is sitting at, with a 80% LVR, it's sitting at 15K per annum net passive. But then when you fully debt consolidate it, or you get it down to a 20, 30% LVR, it might jump to 30 grand, per annum net passive. So I think it's a really important thing to note is it's a variance that when it comes in, it will provide it, but not at the same level that it's going to at the back end, but it's enough that you will be able to have a positive impact from it as well. But if anything, it's really just going to help with serviceability as you go.
Yep. All right, JT. Thank you very much.
Thanks, JT.
Moving on to our next question from Mikey C. Mikey C, what a ledge.
Mikey, he is a good
with
bloke.
His wife, Caitlin. He's a good fella.
He had some nasty things to say about you, though.
Well, mate, from what I'm reading, he's very complimentary, Mikey. I appreciate that. Said, had a discovery call today. So this is a little while ago. Had a discovery call today with the silver fox himself. On you, Jimmy. Absolutely. Mate, I'm happy to call you fox as opposed to the silver dog.
So, who's silver fox? I haven't seen this bloke before.
Okay,
he's there too, Jimmy. You dyed your hair before you went, haven't you?
Mate, I haven't. I haven't dyed my hair at all. I wanted to ask, this is from Mikey. I wanted to ask, I have a property worth about 1.2 to 1.3 mil.
Well done,
and he's got about 390K left on the loan, so he's done well. Me and my wife make about 80 grand each. His wife is 15 weeks pregnant, and the baby is due in September. Well, congrats, Mikey and Caitlin. We're happy for you guys. His question is, I'm keen to make a deal or two happen before. He's hoping for a bread and butter and starting the process of a manufactured cash flow deal. His question is to you, Sam. Should I tell the banks when applying for loans that my wife's pregnant? And just to caveat, his property, the property he mentioned is his primary place of residence. It's not an investment property. So he's basically asking, his wife's pregnant, they're on 80K each. Should he tell the banks when applying for the loan that his wife is pregnant? and
All right,
that
guys.
she's obviously going to go on maternity leave.
And some more dependents are going to be coming into the picture. As always, guys, as you would read in the show notes, this is not financial advice. Anything that Jimmy and I say on this call is just between a master and his silver dog sitting in his co-host.
You've been waiting to use that. You have been lining that up.
Came to me just then. That was a good one.
Time.
I like that. So this is not financial advice, guys. This is just a general chat between Jimmy and I.
Prick.
Jimmy, the day that you're pregnant and some kids are coming, in terms of you yourself, I'll run it on that scenario.
Yeah.
So actually, no, Mikey, you can tell the banks whatever you want to tell them, mate. I'm not going to tell you to admit on a public platform. I'm not going to tell you to admit to the banks that dependents are potentially coming into the picture. I'm glad you didn't read out his last name there, Jimmy. So we're all good on that front. But yeah, man, it's kind of it's his call as to what he does disclose to the bank. Look, legally, you are supposed to disclose this stuff as it's kind of you're supposed to disclose anything, any sort of change in circumstances that are supposed to be coming through. I guess like at the point you are now, you still are a long way from dependent, from your wife going off work. So in the scenario that you're currently in, especially if you buy within say the next 3 months before they come along. By the time you buy, you won't have, dependents in the picture at that point. I don't know, so it's a little bit of a gray area. If it was me personally, Jimmy, or if we were just having a chat,
if you were pregnant, I mean, you look like you're a little bit pregnant post holiday, but if you were pregnant,
that's good call of the year. Well,
go on. If you were pregnant.
Yeah, like I look, if it was me personally, like I can't say this on here. You know what I mean? Like it's something I probably can't publicly say. It's his call as to what he would like to. And
you should read between the lines. I think you should make the decision that you feel most comfortable with. That's actually going to help your situation. Is that fair to say?
Probably, actually, and you should check with a financial planner all decisions that are relating to anything you have heard on this podcast. Moving forward, next question, Mikey. I love it.
Yeah, next. Yeah, Mike, send us a text. David. The next question. This is on Instagram. A lot of people actually put their questions on the gram, don't they?
Yes, they don't like sending in through the chat box, mate. They like to, straight through the gram.
Yeah, they do. Yep. This is from David Meechin. Hey guys, just doing some goal setting based around the amount required to use your services to buy my first property. Fantastic. I've heard you say on podcast you need about 50 to 60K. Is this inclusive of your BA fee and stamp duty? I've also heard you say you like to buy metro regions for a first home buyer, which is something that really appeals to me. First up, would 50 to 60K allow for this, or would I need more? He loves the pod. He says, thanks, boys. So let's break this up into two parts, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's do the first one. Okay. 50 to 60K. What is that including, Sammy? Does it cover everything to get into a deal? Is BA fee and stuff on top of it? Where is he at?
So when I typically say that, guys, and explain that it is possible to get into deals within the 50 to 60K bracket, that is inclusive of APS fees. It's inclusive of our BA fees. It's inclusive of building and pest, conveyancing and legal fees. It also typically includes like a small maintenance buffer that we always include on all deals. When I give numbers on what it costs to do deal, guys, I include everything. Because Vals will tell you that, and then there was all these bunch of other costs on top. Stamp duty is the other big one that obviously comes into those figures as well. It would just be shooting both ourselves in the foot. So typically, that figure does work for everything. 50. Go into your second question now because they are linked, obviously. Jimmy?
Yeah, so 50 to 60 includes to buy a purchase. That's the first one for Dave. And then the second one is he's heard you say that buying in metro areas, can he basically achieve a metro property with 50 to 60, or would he need more?
So 50K, you can't. You'd have to go down into unit sort of style investments. Mate, I'm not a fan of units. We want to stick to housing, and for if we can go up towards a 60K budget, then yes, we can get into we can scrape ourselves into a metro market currently with around about a 60K capital. We will be scraping, and you don't have much time, mate, if we're talking 60K, because a couple of the capital city locations I'm talking about are essentially on the move. But it's not the be all end all as well, Jimmy. I guess one of the things that like I think about is I've made exceptional money in regional markets as well. I do typically like to put clients, especially for their first deals, I like to get them into something that's super steady and secure, like a big capital, like a capital city. That being said, I would never miss the opportunity, to get into a market and to get into a deal because you weren't able to buy into a capital city. So like if you look at it, especially because there's a lot of good, strong regional locations that are growing at the moment, mate, if it's going to take you another 6 to 12 months to save yourself another 10 grand to be able to get to that 60, then I'd be going out and I'd be utilizing the 50K you've got to work with now, if that's what you've got. Man, I would be looking to utilize, say, 50K, get yourself into a good, strong regional growth market, get that out into the marketplace, let's make 20, 25 grand on the way in, in a 12-month window, you're going to be that amount again on top that we're going to be able to pull out and be rolling out into your second deal. Whereas if it takes you 12 months to save yourself another 10 grand, that's literally 12 months and a deal as a minimum, a deal is a minimum that you're going to miss out on in that time frame to kind of stop you from being able to kind of get in there as well. So, yeah, man, that's probably what I'd be putting in on that.
So we're essentially saying the opportunity cost of trying to wait and to get into a metro market. If you're ready to go, and don't think that these major economic regional hubs are not going to be great investments as well. It's just deploying your capital to get into the deal to maximize the opportunity right now. Because you try and wait, you're going to miss that market, and then you're going to miss double markets, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, man, it's a great point, and he's thinking along the right vein for sure. The only thing, man, is like if you don't have that capital and it's going to take you a considerable amount of time, man, let's make money somewhere else and then take it back into that capital city location. Because if in 12 months you can save 10 grand, and then like that example I was giving before, you're probably going to be at 60, 70, maybe $80,000 in a 12-month time that you can pull out. We're 100% going to be able to get you into a good metro location. But if you can build the foundations in that time somewhere else and do really, really well out of it, mate, I definitely would not miss that opportunity. A lot of people do this. It's people have their heart set on somewhere that they really want to buy into, but they're 12 months away from being able to afford to buy into it. The market does 50, 100 grand in a 12-month window. See you later. That opportunity's gone. Whereas if they'd look somewhere else, or I saw a lot in Sydney, I had friends that wanted to save themselves to 20% deposit. Mate, by the time they went from 10% to 20% deposit when they could have gotten in, the market had done $200,000. They'd missed their opportunity. They were priced out. So yeah, it's one of those things, guys. It's always like, how long will it take me to get to that next little bit? If it's a few months, wait the few months. If it's 12 months, if it's 6 to 12 months, put that money in the market, get it working now, as opposed to that avenue.
Okay. Awesome. Well, hopefully that helped you, David. That was some pretty comprehensive info. Well done, Sammy boy. Moving on to our next question. This is via Facebook, Sammy.
You know what, Jimmy?
Morgan.
Mate, I'm feeling generous. If anyone mentions that comment and what was just said in that moment just then of Big David, including David himself, that wants to reach out and book a call with you, Jimmy, and they bring up that and they say, what's the first time of discount? I'm looking to get into my first property. Sammy said there'd be a little discount. You look after us a little bit on our first deal because we know that capital's tight. I want to help out everyone that I can, obviously get into this. Man, I know a lot of people out there know I don't need to be doing this in terms of what I run here. So if I can help more people, especially first timers out there, young fellas, young guys and girls out there hustling, trying to get their first deal done, mention that. I don't even know what it is yet, Jimmy, but I'm gonna come up with something, mate. I'm gonna tell you what it is off air, and there's gonna be a little offer. Oh, mate, I don't know what it's gonna be. Yeah.
Hold your hat, folks. You heard it right here on the Scouting Australia podcast. A bargain's coming your way. You got to mention it though, so make sure you bring it up. Okay. But it's very important. You got a tight budget. You're getting in. You're a bit scared. We get it. I mean, we've all been there, right? So,
man, I know it was one of the big things that held me back from working with a BA back in the day. Was like I always looked at the figure, and unfortunately, I got burnt by going with the wrong BA. But I always looked at the figure and thought, shit, I don't know if I can afford it. But like, I look at now what we help clients with and the opportunity cost and putting them in the right market and buying for the right money. Like it's every day of the week, it's a no-brainer. But I know it can be a bit of a barrier to entry for those first-time guys out there trying to have a crack.
And also for people that have already got a deal, I often say to people when we look at their first property and the numbers that they went out and bought on their own, and some people have done exceptionally well, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
But when people call in and we're running through their properties and we're looking at the deals that they've done, and you're still unsure where the value is, you just need to be completely honest with the deals that you have. And you're looking
Yeah.
at the opportunity cost, because if the property you bought 5 years ago has done nothing, and we're talking about you're questioning a fee of helping you, how much money have you lost in the last 5 years by buying the wrong property? Like, you might not see the value or that you've actually physically paid.
You know what the
Do you
other
see
side of
that all
that
the
is as
time?
well, though, Jimmy? Yeah, man, I do. But
Mhm.
you know what the other side of that is as well? Is people who fluked the last few years because the market did a great run, and they might have bought somewhere. And I've seen people that overpaid, and I've seen prices they paid off. That was a lot of money for what that was.
Mm.
And yeah, man, and I've seen it, and like, so they kind of have a little bit of a false sense of their ability because the market did what it did. And hats off to everyone, man. Like, I never have an issue with anyone that's gone out there and had a crack, and if they've done well, I'm super pumped for them. But sometimes I get a little bit worried. Obviously, I only these days, I know you do on my discovery calls and whatnot as well. So I only speak to people that are sort of coming through. But I remember sometimes in the past, you speak to people and they'd had a little win from a market doing a run, and you look at what they paid for. Like, they've overpaid, but the market's corrected. There's an old saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. And in COVID, that was very, very relevant. People, they might have overpaid. They bought at the back end of Sydney. They overpaid at the back end of Sydney, and then they just had a little correction because of what happened with COVID. And they're like, "Fuck, you do that again?" Like, and the market, that was a blip that has never really been through before. Got to be very selective, and we've got to be very smart. Like, we've moved back into a market where you have to be very smart to make money out of property again. It's not a dartboard at Australia and you're going to win with anything. You have to be very smart and selective with it. So just like, I think majority of the people listening to this are pretty sophisticated people, and they're trying to really educate themselves and get smart on it. Be honest with yourself if something was a fluke, because a lot of the time you look back. I've made this myself. I've always been the first one to admit. I look back at a couple of properties in my portfolio. I was like, shit, that wasn't a great buy. I'm glad the market did what I expected to and did what I hoped it would. But yeah, I think it's just something that people have got to be honest with themselves about as well, because it's that false sense of confidence. If you make the wrong call on a couple of properties because you've got a bit of equity there, the wrong call can literally change the outcome of your future in terms of what you buy next up.
Yep. Okay. Well, moving on to this next question. This is an interesting one, because this one was all around the legal sides of potentially moving a tenant. So this was a question from Morgan. Hey guys, does anyone know if court or going to court is expensive to remove a tenant, or is it covered within your landlord insurance or so forth?
Yeah.
So, Sammy, have you come across this a lot? Have you ever had to remove someone?
I never have. I touched wood on this. I've had an exceptional run with property management and lack of issues. And I think a lot of that comes down to having the right property management, but that isn't the question. That isn't the conversation for here. But obviously I have been involved with a little bit. Funnily enough, I've never had a client call me about a property that we've bought for them that have had this issue. But I do know the process and essentially what happens and what goes on around this as well. Typically, guys, anything that happens with like malicious damage or anything that happens by tenants, tenancy issues and situations, all the rest of the sort of stuff, as long as you have the right agreements and everything in place with both your property manager and with your tenants and everything to do with that, provided all that is upfront and in place, your landlord's insurance policies, majority of the time, cover you for all of that stuff. In terms of your costs, like a lot of the time, if you don't want to go down that route, because sometimes that route can be a bit costly in terms of an excess, especially if it's something small, normally the court processes fees, you'll be able to find it in your management agreements that you would have signed with your property management. Yeah, it's called an MA, management agreement, form 6, whatever it is. Different states, different agreement names. Essentially, in there, you will be able to find what the actual cost of going to court is. A lot of the time, when you sign agency agreements, you might have pretty much everything all-inclusive. It does not matter who is signed with the all-inclusive. The only thing that is always left out of an all-inclusive agency agreement is court costs. So if something pops up with a tenancy and a big issues and all the rest of sort of stuff like that, it is generally an external cost, and it normally ranges between $200 to $300 to $500 depending on your property manager and how much you let them put in at the time when you first did it. But normally, kind of that $200 to $300 for a court appearance is normally pretty standard, and it normally will depend on like where it has to be done as well. So if you have somewhere that's like on the outskirts of a city, and it needs to be done in, let's say in Brizzy, but you're in Ipswich, they might have a slightly higher court cost if they have to go all the way in there as well. So it really will depend on what it is and where it is. That will depend on that. But normally they're your little things in that. And if you've got 1 or 2 court appearances and you don't really want to have to get them, you don't want to have to claim on insurance for it. It's normally 1 or 2 times, obviously, that court appearance fee that will be in your management agreement, your MA.
And that's pretty rare. I mean, you've got multiple rental properties, right? So how many, in
I've got
terms
about
of rents?
60 rentals, man. I've got about 50 to 60 rentals. I've never had to make a claim. Normally it comes down to, actually guys, this is generally a pretty good reflection on yourself as an investor. What I've always found is a good property manager, if you've done the hard yards or you've done the proper yards or you've been recommended the right person, a good property manager should be able to keep you out of strife with bad tenants. Even if you cop some bad tenants, occasionally it can still happen with good property managers. A good property manager will typically be able to handle the situation and handle them out without too much fuss or carry on or all the rest of the bullshit. But where it really will come back onto you is, have you gone for an astronomical rent? Have you gone for a shit rent or a stupid rent? And if you have, then if you have gone for that, if you've gone for something silly or you've held out too long and the market essentially has told you your property is not worth that amount because of where it's sitting, then because it hasn't moved during that time period and how much you've had it sitting on for, then you're being a little bit ignorant as an investor there. You've always got to adjust your expectations to what the market is dictating. So if you put something on for 500 and you can't get 500, change it quickly so you can get a good tenant and it doesn't go stale. As soon as something goes stale, that is a recipe for you getting a bad tenant. So you should be, especially somewhere in a tight vacancy rate area, no problems having a crack for top rents. If you can't get it, adjust it quickly and get it leased with a good tenant while there is still demand there.
Sammy, absolutely smashed that one. There was a whole bunch of great content there.
Thank you, mate.
So hopefully that answered that question. And mate, we've arrived at the final question for today.
Beautiful. On time.
You're just flying through them. For once, we've actually been on time. This is from Michael Tuttle, Mikey C. Hey guys, loving the podcast lately. Didn't like him earlier.
You obviously didn't like it earlier. What a wanker. Nah, we love you, Mikey. We love you, buddy. Even though Jimmy's giving out everyone's names, like surnames on this one as well. Bloody hell, mate.
Michael, well, you got to share the love. Mikey T. My question to you, Sammy, when you buy a tenanted investment property, do you need to consider how long you'll be under market rent and for how long for? For example, if I buy a property tenanted for the next 6 months at $330 per week, but the average rental price for the market is $420, is 6 months too long to be locked in at under market rent?
Great
question.
Great question.
Mickey T?
Great question. You know why it's a great question? Because it always comes down to, actually, Jimmy, what does it always come down to?
Oh, well, it depends on whether or not you're going to be buying your next deal and refinancing the deal, right? And looking at your income when you're adding up your serviceability. So does your serviceability allow you to continue to accumulate? But if it doesn't, Sammy, and it's affecting your ability to buy your next purchase, then it is important to make sure that it is at market rent.
Okay, that's one thing. That's probably like number 3 on the list. But it is on there. It's a good point. The only thing is, if it's up in 6 months and he's about to buy it, by the time he settles it, it's got 3 to 4 months to go. It's one thing. The most important thing is how much of a, or equal 1 and 2. Okay, so your comment number 3, equal 1 and 2 is how much of a discount are you buying the property for? So as long as you're buying it at a significant discount, you've always got to have a look. Like, so what was it, 330 compared to 420? That's $90 a week. You know, if it was over the course of a full year, we're at $4,500, right? But we're talking 6 months, so we're talking less than $2,500. Yeah, we're talking 4 months. Really, we're literally talking like $2,500, $3,000. A lot of people will turn down a deal and not buy a deal because they see their $90 difference. But what I see is, what is the price we're actually getting it for? If we're getting a $30,000 discount and it cost me an extra $3,000 to hold it, I don't care. We're still $27,000 in front. I would take that deal every day of the week. No questions. That's the first thing, the big thing. If you're buying something at like market or it's $5-10 below, but you're locked in that low, I probably wouldn't. I probably wouldn't worry about it. But if it's a significant discount, if it's a good discount, then it's worthwhile for sure. The equal point on that is does your serviceability allow it? So not so much on the next deal, but did you buy this deal? So what's the purchase price of this thing? Is it 350, 400? Is it 250 or is it 500? So you're buying for 500 grand, it's renting for 330, but you you had a pre-approval for a 500 grand purchase at a 400 or a 450 rental, then that thing is not going to service. You won't actually be able to purchase it. But if it's still within the parameters of your serviceability and your pre-approval, that is really key, guys, because you will crash on finance if it doesn't. But if it does, then you're fine. But yeah, guys, I would always weigh that up around what's the actual opportunity cost? How much could you potentially make out of this deal? Is it worthwhile doing or not? It's a pretty easy way to kind of really number crunch that and then come out in the back end. Is it worthwhile doing or not? Really based on those figures. I go back to, I think I've said this once or twice before in this, the numbers don't lie. And it is all about the numbers. So that's what you really want to get clear on. Is it worthwhile or not?
And also for Mikey, depending on also, is it just a natural uplift in the market rent, or is there something that you're going to execute to actually get that rent? So you remember a deal that we did, that you did for me, that it was rented. We bought it for $375. It was rented for $390 at the time, but we knew it was under market rent. It was at a discount, and by doing it, by doing a very little strategy that I think it cost maybe $5,000. That property then rented for $480. So, but I had to wait for that tenancy to leave to do the work. So it was definitely worth it. And because we're looking at long-term investing, layering on top of all the things that you've said, don't be short-sighted and thinking like everything else stacks up. You bought it at a discount. It helps our portfolio. It's not hurting us. Don't be short-sighted and miss out on an opportunity like that. That you're going to not only get that uplift. So.
Definitely, man.
Right,
if it allows you to get a great deal, mate, then it's 100% worth doing. No, I agree with you, bud. That's a great point.
Awesome.
Beautiful, man. Smashed it out.
Mate, that was quick. I've got some paella. How do you pronounce it? You got the official Spanish.
Yeah,
you're not allowed to pronounce the L's, Sammy. You're not allowed to pronounce the L's, apparently.
Yeah.
That's you can't even say Barcelona. You have to say Barcelona. You have to have a that's it. The locals out here. So
Jimmy, mate, thank you once again. I'm going to wrap up your bullshit. You're talking shit as usual, mate. Thanks for jumping on. It's always a pleasure. The silver dog himself, mate. It's great having you on. Thank you for jumping on, bud, from a long way overseas.
Good to see you.
Mate, don't feel like you need to come back too quick, but enjoy your time over there, buddy. Listeners, once again, thank you for tuning in. I hope you took some great value out of that episode. If there was anything in particular you thought someone in your circle might know, or if you did take any value out of it, we would massively appreciate it. As always, if you could please send it on to anyone within your circle. You want to keep building that inner circle of people thinking in the same way that you and I do, so we keep building that like-minded inner circle to keep building the momentum around you, which will help both you and them achieve great things. So guys, thank you very much. And also, if you haven't left us a 5-star review yet, please jump on, leave us a 5-star review. Let us know what you really think. Keep those coming in, guys. We're at some great levels there. And Jimmy, I have heard mate, I think it's coming next time we're in the studio, mate. Something might be dropping. An old dance move apparently is coming to the fore. Apparently we have hit the number. We've hit the number.
People need to listen to our first ever show. I think it might have been number 1 or 2. And Sammy made a promise to the listeners out there. It must have been the first one. You did make a promise, and I know you love committing to your promises. So if you go back to the episode number 1, folks, you're in for a big surprise, because when we're next in the studio, look out.
It's slow. It's slow moving. But it's coming. Well, the species is. Anyway, guys, if you want any assistance or help with being out there and investing as well, investing with the best, with everything that we can help you do, please reach out to us at www.australianpropertyscout.com.au. If you've got any questions, this obviously, guys, was another monthly Q&A that we love delivering for you guys. Any more questions, please feel free to send in. Either send them in the show notes of this episode on whatever platform you're listening on. There is an email within that. You can send in any of your questions in there. As always, guys, like on this app today, a lot of the questions came in from Facebook and Instagram as well. So make sure you're jumping on there. You're following us at Australian Property Scout on all those socials. Otherwise, guys, thank you once again for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. Jimmy, mate, thank you once again tuning in from a long way away,
Thanks,
mate. It's a pleasure as always, bud. Guys, until next week. Until Shark Bites. I'll see you all on Shark Bites. Jimmy won't be there. He's probably getting his head bitten off. But otherwise, guys, until Shark Bites, until next week, guys, we'll see you all later.